Hello everyone. Welcome to the Machine Learning Teach by Doing Day 5. My name is Dr. Raj Dandekar, and in this lecture we will be looking at Python and VS Code. We will be understanding all about the Python language, and not just that, we will do a hands-on installation of Python, and I'll show you how to execute your first ever Python code. Students who already are familiar with Python can feel free to skip this particular lecture, or they can follow along to clarify some concepts. Whereas students who have always been afraid of, let's say, coding or installing Python, or they have heard about Python but they really don't know what's the hype around it, or they have not never installed it in person. I'll show you how easy and how quick it is really to install Python. You'll be able to do it in just 15 to 20 minutes. And I'll also go a bit more into text editors such as VS Code and how to install VS Code. We will also discuss the differences between why is a editor really important and its difference with a interpreter, let's say. So you must have heard about all these terms, but if you have never gotten around to installing Python, or if you have been always afraid of coding, right, follow along with me in this lecture and I'll show you how simple it is really to install Python and to run your first Python code. So my philosophy with coding is pretty simple. Instead of first trying to understand every single thing, you just run a code which works initially. You can maybe copy it from somewhere and just run it on your machine. When that code runs for the first time and you see the output, you get a lot of motivation to continue learning further. And then you can go back to understand how the code was written. But if you spend months and months trying to understand the code itself without ever running it on your laptop or your computer, then you never get the motivation. I believe the best way to learn is to get your hands dirty initially, directly jump into it, run your first code, and then go back and see what was written in the code. That's how I have learned coding my entire life. So don't be scared of this beast. Um, it has become so important now to learn Python that all of us should understand Python and should execute Python code. And what I want to show in this particular lecture is that it's really very, very easy to run your first Python script. So let's get started. In the previous four lectures, we looked at the general overview of ML teach by doing. In the second lecture, we looked at intro to ML. In the third lecture, we looked at types of ML models. And in the fourth lecture, we looked at the 6 steps of ML project. In this last lecture, I had asked a question about training data and test data. In particular, I had asked how can we be so sure that optimizing training data will lead to less amount of test error, or optimizing for training error would lead to less amount of test error. Out of all the responses which we received in the comments, the best response was the one which said that the distribution of data in the training set should be similar to the distribution of data in the test set. So if it's a Gaussian distribution, let's say, we can be confident that, or if it's any other distribution, we can be confident that if we have minimized the training error, the test error will also be minimized because the data follows a similar distribution. We will come to this point in later lectures also, but please be active on the comments because we'll be discussing it in subsequent videos, the best comments. And as I'm going to show in this lecture how to install Python and run Python code, if you face any doubts in the installation or if you are stuck somewhere, please put it in the comments and we will resolve the doubt as soon as possible. So let's get started with the day 5. First, I want to quickly go through what exactly is Python. So for viewers or for students who have no clue about this, but they have just heard of it and they don't know the basics. Python is a popular programming language which is known for its simplicity and readability. And it is also widely used in various domains such as machine learning and artificial intelligence. The way I like to think about Python is it's like a tool which all ML engineers should have. If Python did not exist, the pace of ML research would really slow down. Python has really made it easy for engineers and students like us to run ML algorithms or run ML techniques on our own laptops. So the six steps which we saw in the previous lecture, the six ML steps, Python is the place where we run and execute those steps. And that's why courses give so much preference to it. So if you look at the MIT's course, we have finished this intro to ML portion, and from next week onwards we'll be looking at linear classifiers. Even in the ML for beginners Microsoft course, we have finished the introduction section as has been seen here, and next we will move towards regression. Now, as for both the MIT's course and this course, it is essential that you install Python, and that's why we are going through this particular lecture where we are understanding what Python is and how to install it, because it will really be useful for all our tasks later when we go to regression, when we go to classification, and when we look at other ML algorithms. It is important to install Python from right now so that when it comes to that stage and when we do hands-on projects, you can directly follow along. So this series is even meant for students who have no clue about Python, because as you can see, I am going right from the very basics. So this is a popular programming language, and the way I think of it is a tool which ML engineers and students should definitely have in their toolbox. Now, the reason why Python has become so popular for machine learning is because of four things, I believe. The first thing is it's pretty simple to understand, and it's pretty simple to read and write the code in Python. As we go through the lectures, you will also see that writing code in Python is much easier than writing it in C or C++. At least for engineers who don't have coding background before. That's why so many engineers have transitioned to Python in the first place. Secondly, a number of researchers, number of students and engineers have built libraries now for ML and AI. So that makes it very easy for me to run different tasks. For example, if I want to train a language model, I don't have to write the entire thing from scratch. I can just use a pre-written library in Python. Thirdly, it's open source, which means, as we will see in today's lecture, it's completely free to download Python, to install it, and to run your first code. There is no barrier to entry. And finally, there is a large community support. If you ask any doubt on the internet, on Stack Overflow, I'm sure there will be a response to it. There are millions of people who are using Python on a daily basis. So the community support for this language is really incredible. These are the four reasons why Python has really become so popular in the first place. So let's dive into the lecture, and let's get started with installing Python. Okay. So I'll also be sharing this download link uh, in the description, but you can just go to Google and type download Python. The first link which will open up will look something like this. And this is exactly where you have to go to download Python. Now, here you will see that there are options for Windows, Mac, etc. So you can just select whichever platform is convenient to you and you can download. So I am using a Mac, so it has automatically shown download the latest version for Mac OS. So then I click on this download button. If you are using Windows, please go to this particular link and then click on the download button. Remember to download the latest version of Python because that will be the most reliable. Do not download Python 2. So Python 2 versions are very old. They are not even here, I think. So download the latest version. Click on this button and the download will start over here. You will see the download progressing. I think it's around 400 MB or something, but it took around 2 minutes for me to download it on my PC when I did it yesterday. Depending on the internet speed, you can wait for some time for the downloading to finish. Now when the download finishes, it will appear in your downloads. It will essentially appear in your downloads folder, and then you just have to follow the installation instructions sequentially. So just click on I agree, and whichever folder has space, you can install Python there. So for the Mac, you can see that the Python application has been installed over here. Once the Python is installed, it will show a Python 3.12 folder, and you will see these different files within this folder itself. Great. So this is the first step. It's very simple. Python is directly installed on your system. Okay. Now you actually might think that can I just start running Python code? So if you click on this IDLE, you can indeed actually start typing things here, and to check whether the installation has proceeded correctly, what I suggest is go to this place where Python has been downloaded. So let me go to, yeah, here, and then click on this IDLE here, and then try typing things like try typing 22 into 22, and if it actually gives the correct answer, right, which means that Python is installed correctly on your system. Now I want to come to a very important point, which is what is an interpreter and what is an editor, and what have we really downloaded in the first place. So interpreter is a program that translates and executes source code written in a language, let's say Python, directly into machine readable instructions, which means that whatever we have downloaded right now is an interpreter. Whenever it sees a code, it translates the code into machine readable instructions and then it executes the code. And then what is an editor? A text editor is basically that place where we will write and modify source code. So essentially, you can think of a text editor as a place for writing and editing source code, and an interpreter is used to execute that code. So what we have downloaded right now is an interpreter, but we need something on top of that where we write the code. So think of the interpreter as taking information from the editor and then passing it on to the machine to execute it on the CPU. And that's why text editors are very important. Text editors allow us to write code very easily and to manage code files. So you can see the problem here is that if I start writing code here, it is also passed on to the interpreter, but this does not provide me any file management system. Where do I create different folders? It does not provide me any support also. So this is not the best place to write code. We need a text editor where we are writing the Python code. I hope you are understanding the difference between interpreter and editor. Think of it as like a relay race, right? In the relay race, the editor first receives the baton where we write the code, we do the file management, and then the baton is passed to the interpreter, which then passes it to the machine CPU where the code is actually run and the output is again displayed in the editor. So up till now, when we have downloaded Python, we have kind of installed the interpreter. But now we really need to install a text editor. And you may be thinking, I do have Notepad already. So can I just use Notepad? You can use Notepad, but it's not the best for file management. In fact, there have been some brilliant modern text editors, which I'm going to introduce you right now. So up till now, we have installed an interpreter, but we will need a text editor for writing and managing our code files. Correct? I hope everyone is with me up until this stage. So essentially, there are four popular text editors which exist out there, and you can search all about this. The first is called VS Code, which we are going to install. There is also a text editor called Sublime Text. There is a text editor called PyCharm. There is a text editor called Vim. And I know programmers, engineers, and scientists who use all these four types. So some use PyCharm, some use Vim, some use Sublime Text. But I have personally found that for beginners, VS Code is the best. I have been using VS Code a lot, and this is not to say that VS Code is better than all of them. I'm not making this comparison right now. I'm just saying that I have used VS Code before and I found it super friendly as a text editor. So, for the purposes of this particular series, we are going to execute all our Python code in VS Code. So, that's great. I invite you all to look into these other text editors as well and try to just see how they are. But let us stick with VS Code for now. It's a best place to manage files, write code efficiently. It even highlights different parts when it detects Python language. All other text editors also do these things, but for the purposes of this course, let's stick with VS Code. The next task is going ahead and installing VS Code. So similar to what we did for Python, you can type install VS Code. Now when you type install VS Code, click on the first link which shows up, and similar to what we discussed before, you can download based on the system which you have for Windows or Ubuntu or for Mac. Now I have a Mac, so I downloaded this. When you click on the download, like this page will show up, and when you click on this arrow, the download will start. So let me just mark it for you guys here. Okay, so this is what I installed for Mac. If you are using Windows, then please click on this particular link and it will start VS Code installation. VS Code is around 180 to 200 MB if I am not wrong, and that will also install pretty quickly. Uh, VS Code installation does not take any further steps. Once it's installed on your system, that's it. You have VS Code now. The next thing in this relay race, which we discussed between editor and interpreter, we now need to integrate Python with VS Code. So we need to write a Python script in VS Code and then we need to execute that script. So let us get started with that. I'll show you how simple it is to write your first Python script in VS Code. So I hope everyone has installed VS Code in the first place, right? So what I then suggest is go to the VS Code application. So let me delete this right now. Uh, Remove folder. So let's say you see nothing here right now, right? Go to the VS Code application like this, and let's say you don't see anything here. There is nothing. Go to the left hand side tab. You will see different icons here, such as search, source control, run and debug, extensions, testing, and Julia. So here click on extensions. Click on extensions and search Python. After you search for this Python extension, the first thing will show up, which has around huge number of installations. So I have already installed it, that's why it's showing uninstall here, but you all will see an install option here. So click on this install option and it will install in 30 seconds for you on your VS Code. This means now that our VS Code has a Python extension, which means whenever we have a .py code file, VS Code will automatically recognize it. So that's the first step which we need to do. I hope everyone is with me till this stage. I hope you have installed VS Code and you have installed the Python extension on VS Code. That's the first step. The second step which we need to do is tell VS Code what is our Python interpreter. So remember I told you about the interpreter before, which you also downloaded, right? So you need to tell VS Code what is your Python interpreter. In some cases VS Code detects it automatically, but this is the link between VS Code and Python interpreter which you have downloaded. This is the link between the VS Code downloading and the Python downloading which you have done before. So if you have Windows, press Control plus Shift plus P in VS Code, and if you have Mac, press Command plus Shift plus P. So I am going to VS Code right now, and I am pressing Command plus Shift plus P. You see this thing shows up Python Select Interpreter. If you have Windows, press Control plus Shift plus P, and this thing will show up. So click on Python Select Interpreter, and several different options will show up. So from this list, click on this recommended. Click on this recommended option here which shows up for the first, and I have already selected it. Click on this and then press escape. That's it. You might need to restart the VS Code again, but after doing this it tells the VS Code which is your Python interpreter and where is it installed. So let me show it again. Select Python interpreter and click on the first link which shows up, which is recommended. It shows recommended over here. So that's the second step. Select Python interpreter. Now we have established the link between VS Code, which is the text editor, and the interpreter which we downloaded previously. The next step is creating a folder. Now, this is the file management system which I talked about, which is actually not present in if you don't use a text editor, right? So here you see we have not created any folders here. So let us go ahead and create a folder where we will write our Python scripts. So let me go to the desktop and let me create a folder here. And I'm going to write the folder Python basics. Python basics. So this folder has been created. And once the folder has been created on the desktop, I go to file, I go to add folder to workspace, and then I add Python basics here. So I say yes, and here you can see this folder has automatically appeared over here. Within this folder, now I will create a .py file, which is my first Python script. So to do that, look at these four icons here. The first icon is new file, second icon is new folder, third icon is refresh explorer, and fourth icon is collapse folder in explorer. So let me click on the first icon here, which is new file, and let me type hello world.py. So you can see that since we installed the VS Code extension, VS Code automatically put an icon over here, which is the Python symbol or the Python logo. So it automatically detects this uh, as a, as a Python script. So this step we had done. This is the file management system. This is how text editors make our life so much easier as programmers. I can create different folders here now. I can create different files, and it just makes organizing the code very easy. Now let me go to the next step, which is writing our first code. So this is what I told about the approach of learning coding, right? Let's say if you have not learned how to do Python coding, right? It's fine. Just follow along with this tutorial and type this hello world. So just type this, or let me give a comma here. So let's type this. Okay, this is your first code, which has been written in Python. And now let us see how to execute this particular code. So, okay, this code has been written. Now there are two ways to execute this. The first way is to first open a terminal. So let me go to this Python basics and let me right click and click on open in integrated terminal. When I open an integrated terminal, this terminal line will show up. And one way to run this code is type Python 3 hello world.py, and then I run this. You can see this printing has been done, which means our code is executing perfectly. That's it. This is as easy as that. You have now run your first Python code. So if I can even write my name here or write some different things such as welcome to ML teach by doing Raj. You can also see that the VS Code automatically tells you uh, the meaning of this function. So if you just hover over to this function, since we have installed the Python extension, it tells you how this function actually works. So if you're a beginner who does not know about Python, just type this with your name. Just type this with your name, save this file, and again type Python 3 hello world.py and see the result. When you start seeing this result on your own, you will itself get a lot of motivation and confidence to further do some new things, further try to copy paste some other codes and learn how they work. This is how coding should be learned in the first place. I think you should first try to get results and then try to see why those results are working. That's the best way to stay motivated and not lose focus when you learn a new programming language. Instead of learning different syntax for 2 months, learning about the print statement for a long time, then executing it, I have seen many students lose motivation this way. So this is amazing, right? You have just run your Python script. That's it. There is another way to run this script actually. You can see this arrow here, which is run Python file. You can even click on this arrow, and it does the same thing. It runs these two print statements. Now, one more thing is if you want to execute commands line by line, what you can do is, let's say I don't want to run this entire thing, but I just want to run the first part. How do I do it? So the way to do it is highlight it and then press shift and enter. So if you press shift and enter, you will see that only the first part has been run right now. If you see in the console, now if I only want to run the second part, I do the same thing. I highlight it and then I press shift and enter. So here you can see only second part has been run. This is useful for debugging, right? Let's say if you have 50 lines and you don't want to run everything together, you can run the code line by pressing shift and enter. So essentially, there are three ways to run the code. The first is to, as a recap, the first is to go here, type or click on open in integrated terminal and type Python 3 hello world.py. This is the first way to run the full code. The second way is to click on this arrow at the top right, run Python file, which I have clicked right now. And the third way is to just take it sequentially. So highlight the part which you want to run and press shift enter, and then it runs only that part. That's it. Python is as simple as this. It's as easy as this to run your first code. And when you run your first code, it opens a door for every single thing. It's like a 0 to 1 step. When you run the hello world code, the reason hello world codes are so famous is because when you run the hello world code, it opens your door to a new programming language. And now you are no longer intimidated or scared by it, right? Within 15 to 20 minutes, you can download Python, you can download VS Code, and you can run your first code. It's as simple as that. Okay, so we have just run our first Python script in VS Code and we have obtained the results. This now serves as the doorway for you to explore many more things. You can go to the python.org website and click on the documentation and try to look at the beginner's guide over here. You can just initially, as I mentioned, copy some examples and paste it in the VS Code text editor and try to run them. Once you run some examples, right, you will also get a lot more motivation and then you can continue with this. So now you no longer have to fear Python and think that you're missing out on the ML bus because you don't know Python. This is your starting point. And as we go through different lectures, such as for example when we come to the regression lecture over here in the Microsoft course, and when we come to linear classifiers, there will be a time when we will need to execute these codes in Python. At that time, I'll of course go through the different things needed in Python, such as the different libraries, how different code lines or commands work in Python. So in this particular set of videos, we'll be following a hands-on approach where we'll be learning through the results first and then trying to understand what is written in the code. I hope all of you through this lecture installed Python, installed VS Code. And as I mentioned before, if you have some doubts in this installation or if you are stuck somewhere, please comment on the video so that we can reply as soon as possible to resolve your doubts. It's important that you install Python and VS Code because they are the building blocks for many of the projects which we are going to do later in this course series. Again, thank you so much everyone for those who are following this series. I'll again continue to post uh, my learnings and together we will learn. So please stick with me through this process. As you see, I am making videos which are short so that you don't have to spend too much time. You just need to be consistent every single day. Consistency is the key. So don't miss out on the lectures. If you miss some previous lectures, try to see them. We have had 4 lectures before. In subsequent lectures, we will go through linear classifiers and we'll look at regression, and we'll also be executing Python projects for the same. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you in the next lecture.